Welcome to the Clean Library Podcast, where content meets conscience. We believe there are millions of you readers out there desperately searching for a better way to find clean content. Each episode, we will introduce you to a new author of clean books, giving you, your family, and your friends clean options.
Hello and welcome back to the Clean Library Podcast. My name is Marcus Williams, and today I'm here with our special guest, author Kurt Jensen. Kurt was born in Fontana, California, but his family eventually settled down in his hometown of Grants Pass, Oregon, where he grew up for the rest of his adolescence. The magic of childhood education formed his love for reading and writing. His passion for writing started in his third grade class with a fiction story writing assignment. The feeling of pure joy filled Kurt's entire body as he wrote a story all his own. And though the story didn't win any awards, Kurt was hooked from there on out. Other such milestones included writing other stories in school and then, without an invitation, reading them in front of his class because he felt the drive to do so. Years later, Kurt wrote a bucket list, and on that list was to write and publish a novel. Kurt attended Brigham Young University and eventually got a bachelor's in social cultural anthropology. He is now working on a bachelor's degree for video game design at the University of Utah. Welcome, Kurt. Thank you so much for being with us.
Great to be here, Marcus. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. So before we jump into getting to know about you and your journey, let's read your 2 truths and a lie. So, number 1, I made a raft out of bamboo and milk jugs. Number 2, I won my middle school's poetry competition. And number 3, my favorite lunch combo is a peanut butter jelly sandwich with salsa and tortilla chips. All right, so raft out of bamboo and milk jugs, middle school poetry competition, and PB&J with salsa and tortilla chips. So we'll try to figure out if I can guess that correctly, and I'll introduce you to our scorekeeper, Steve. So since Brock is not here with us today, I have a chance to catch up. So we'll see if I can manage to gain on him a little bit. All right. So you said your bucket list was to write a book. What was that first drive or inspiration to actually sit down and do it?
Well, I had a friend, his name was Nate, and he had actually published a book, and I had been with him in college. And so when I actually saw him publish his own, I guess I just hadn't had anybody nearby that were close to me that had ever done it. And it kind of really inspired me to finally do it. So that's when I started actually wanting to write a book and realizing that I didn't have to write, 5,000 words a day. It could just have been a couple hundred words a day. And it just became a reality after that. I mean, it was very slow, but that was the motivation I needed, and I'm really grateful for that friend.
Yeah, and kind of like any big goal, sometimes if you look at the finish line, it's overwhelming. But when you take it a little bit at a time, every day, you can make it happen. So what is that first book, and what is it about?
The first book, it's called Rise Right. The synopsis basically is Rye Nelson, a young man working on a train in early 1900s America, is forced to find a father he's never known, while also overcoming a revenge-laden gang that hopes to capture and kill his grandfather.
Okay, cool. So would you categorize that as a Western or an adventure? Like, what category would you put that in?
I think with the demographic and the language that's being used in it, I would put it as like a middle grade adventure novel. There is some Western elements because it is the early 1900s, but one of the main characters or props is an early Indian motorcycle. So I kind of wanted to show the transition from Western horses and early machines. So that was kind of the idea.
Oh, cool. All right. So was that story, like, where did the story come from? How did you think of those ideas? I love to hear about authors' processes and stuff.
Thanks for asking. I'd have to go back and think about it, but I did have a character in middle school. I had a comic that me and my friends read. It was a comic I made on notebook paper that I would just get from class, and it was called Kurtlis the Cutlass Pirate, and it was
Mhm.
me, the Kool-Aid guy, and Spider-Man on a ship doing weird, funny things, and it's kind of ridiculous now if I think about it. But uh, one of the characters I put in there, his name was Scarecrow, and he was kind of this emo crosshatch, black and white type of character that I eventually kind of morphed later on in my life until he became Rye, and I really wanted to make this character part of a story.
Mhm.
So once I had the character and I had kind of the general feeling of who the character was, I don't know if whenever you make a sketch or you start to think of a character and you kind of get the feeling of that character, you kind of know who they are and where they came from. So I felt like early 1900s would have been great. Uh, I was a fan of the feeling of the movie "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou," so I kind of wanted
Yeah.
to have that southern old feel, even though the it starts in Oregon. The story starts
Yeah.
in Oregon, but from there, it's one of those things. As an author, I'm guessing you're also a big author too, right, Marcus?
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. So when you're thinking about a story, sometimes you're just walking and thinking to yourself what these characters should do. And in my mind, the story I was creating was interesting to me, so I really wanted to just go from one step to another. And as authors do, sometimes when we write, it's almost like the characters come alive and you kind of just watch what they do. So I kind of felt that way.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting because it's fun speaking with different authors to talk about how the characters speak to them because it's a very different process for a lot of people, and it's a crazy experience. And sometimes I'll have an idea for a book, but I don't. If I'm really busy doing other stuff, I'm like, I don't want to sit down and start that book because once I do, like the characters just take over my life, and that's all I'm focused on. So I hesitate if I know I've got other things I need to focus on.
Yeah, no, for sure. I feel the same way. It doesn't happen all the time, but when it does happen, you're like, I want to keep this moment, bottle it up, and be in it forever, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So did the story just naturally evolve as a middle grade story, or did you make a conscious decision that this is the audience I want, is the younger kids?
It didn't start out that way. I feel like Rye was actually a little bit older. I'd say his early 20s, but after doing some readings with some other author groups and then reading parts of the stories, and almost they kept saying he's acting younger.
Hmm.
So I decided to make him a little bit younger, as in 15, 16, and 14, just kind of in between that range.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's basically how that came about.
Okay. um in kind of in the evolution of writing and finding your style, was there a point in time where you said, I want to keep my books clean for a broader audience, or was it just like a natural thing for you, or how did that process work for you?
Oh, for sure. So I myself feel that clean media is hard to come by, and just putting profanities doesn't make you edgy or cool. It
Yeah.
kind of, whenever I feel something's being forced upon me, I actually don't feel very comfortable in that. So I wanted to make sure that everything kind of went with my own beliefs,
Hmm.
and I wanted to make sure that the characters could still be themselves, because I understand. Let's say a character isn't religious or
Yeah.
doesn't care and curses. It's like, okay, that makes sense because that's who they are, and they're not. I'm not trying to force my beliefs on them,
Right.
but when it comes to the overall message, I want to make sure it's something that's uplifting and that's positive. So
Yeah. Yeah. That totally makes sense. And I think it's interesting. I mean, in books, there are no rating systems, which is something we've talked about a lot. But so we end up using movies or TV as examples. But
yeah,
when you look at, say, PG-13, which by definition is 13-year-olds, which is kind of in that middle grade range, um, it almost feels like there's a pressure for kids to think that they've got to talk like that, or they have to swear, or they have to have, like, in order to be cool, they've got to also. So I think it's important to have good stories, good examples to them, showing them that you don't, like, there is no pressure. There's no one forcing you to cuss or grow up too soon.
Yeah. And I think that's where
So
they get confused. It's what is a grown up, and I need to be more grown up. I think I felt like that too. Like I am more mature maybe than my colleagues, so I want to be more mature, so I need to be like this. But that's not the case. That I think of video games too. Obviously, I'm going into it, but there's that M-rated. The term mature. What does that even mean? You know?
yeah, right, right. Like, in order to be mature, you have to be okay with certain themes or elements. Like, I can be a mature adult and not want that stuff. So yeah, that's a good point. So how does that, speaking of video games, how does the storytelling fit in with your working on the video game career?
Great question. So this initial novel, I don't think has anything to do with the video game career, though. I do want to pursue something that's more creative, that's kind of all my own, not taking maybe something that somebody else has made, but making something from whole cloth, as one could say. Um, so the next novel I'm actually doing is going to be a video game. It's the script for it. So I am doing that in the future, but this one specifically is not that. Though I might have some video game tendencies in my brain just because it's been a structure
Right.
that I've known all my life. So
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Um, so are you, as a script for a video game, is it going to be in novel form as well that people can read, or are you specifically creating it for a game?
I'm making it into a script more like it's going to act. There's going to be a novel version, and
Okay.
then when I put it into the game, I'm basically going to use all the dialogue from the book, but I'm not going to like just copy and paste it, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
um, it's going to help me make all the assets and knowing exactly what I need to do. So I
Hmm.
think that's why I wanted to do that first, to make sure I don't, let's say I start making something and then story changes and I have to make it again or different. So
Cool. And it seems to me, I'm not a huge gamer, but it seems to me that having a story first, especially one that is good enough to be a book or a novel, should really help the gameplay. Like, really build those characters and make just create a better experience, I would think.
oh, for sure. Like you said, you probably haven't played a crazy amount of games, but there's this one genre I really enjoy called role playing games, or JRPGs, Japanese role playing games.
Uh huh.
And one of the drives usually in those games is, yes, the battle system, but it's also the story that is kind of stringing you along. So if the story's bad and you don't really want to know what's going to happen, you kind of stop playing. At least that's how I feel about it.
Yeah. Or I skip through those scenes just to get to the next fight scene. Yeah, if it doesn't pull you in, then it's hard to spend that much time on it.
Oh yeah, I feel bad for the animators that just get their scenes skipped all the time. But yeah, sometimes you got to.
Yeah. So with your with Rise Right, did you is it traditionally published, self-published? What did you do there?
So I did self-publish it, but I have been trying to send it to traditional publishers. Got from a first-time writer, first-time book. I did get some rejection letters back, and I think that's normal. I've heard of
Yeah.
that. I've heard that a lot from a lot of different authors. So, uh, but one day, I hope that there would be a traditional publisher that would take it and or the future projects that I have. So yeah, it would be nice to get a traditional publisher, but at the moment, self-publishing is at least something that gets it out in the world. So
Yeah. Um, as part of the self-publishing process, how did you learn how to do it? Because there are a lot of steps. People don't realize it's not just as easy as posting it on the internet and you're done. So how did you figure out how to do it?
great question. So I do have an aunt who has written a couple of books, and so I was trying to talk to her about different ways of publishing. And your previous guest, Erin, from the author of the Legends of Elmer Earth, she is part of this author group here that I'm also part of, although I'm not as hardcore into it as she is. Uh, it's the Author Ready, and the main person that made it was the author of the Michael Vey books,
Mm-hmm.
Richard Paul Evans.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people in that community I was able to ask questions, but I also just kind of Google searched it, and there's obviously tons of websites that compare all the self-publishing sites. So I found what was best for me, and then kind of went from there.
Okay. Cool. So is it available wide in lots of different stores, or did you choose to go with just Amazon or just Barnes and Noble or?
At first, I just did Amazon, but after looking at different companies, and also I
Mhm.
was trying to do some book signings at Barnes and Noble, I found out I couldn't just go to Amazon. I had to publish it through different means.
Yeah.
So I did go through this website you probably know of called Drafted Digital
Uh-huh.
that displayed it everywhere as well in a bunch of different stores digitally, and they could just order it physically online too. So that's kind of the evolution of my distribution, I would
Yeah.
say.
So after self-publishing, have you submitted your book to traditional publishers since then? Um, or did you kind of stop the query process after you self-published?
Oh no, I did. I didn't stop. I sent them some queries and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
There is a kind of only a handful that I could find. There's probably a lot more, and maybe you can help me with this that I could maybe submit to. But kind of the bigger ones online, I got back rejection letters. So it's kind of one of those things. I'm wondering where do I go now?
Yeah.
Because obviously traditional publishing, you want to get paid, but also it's just to get your books physically in stores. So I'm trying to, if I could find a publisher that could do both, that'd be great.
Yeah, and I've heard, I haven't tried it, but I've heard that there are times where once you self-publish, traditional publishers are less likely to pick it up unless you can prove sell, a lot of sales and stuff. So like there's pros and cons to it, of course. Um, I've decided to just stick with self-publishing myself and not worry about it. Whether that's the right decision or not, I guess time will tell. Who knows? But um,
Yeah.
it's difficult because, yeah, it's great. But how long is it going to take? Like, how many query letters do you have to? And so, how long is your book sitting, waiting to be published or read? When I figured I could put it out now and start getting people reading it now. So, yeah, it's a tough decision, and I think there's everyone's a little bit different, and there's a fit for you that might be a little bit different for me, and vice versa. And it really kind of depends on who your audience is and how you find them, and which leads me to my next question. Um, what have you been doing to try to find an audience and readers or market yourself?
Good question too. So I kind of gone through the list of that been online and through some newsletters of what authors can do, especially if you self-publish. It is hard to just get your word out there if you don't have money. Um,
Yeah.
I really liked this picture I saw a couple months ago. Basically, it has these really tall steps that are just gradually going and there's a person that's trying to climb up the step, but it's too high for him. But he's really trying. But the other person, there's another person there who's made steps out of cash, and he can just walk all the way up to the top. And I do feel that way as a as a author. It's almost like, I know that cash isn't everything, but it really does help to market anything that you do. Otherwise, it's really hard to just go in it. If your book's just the most amazing thing, it's gonna get a reader's eyes. But if it's not necessarily the crazy blockbuster that that you want it to be, then it's going to be a little bit harder. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I've tried everything from social media, referring to giving books away as gifts, uh, going to book signings, Barnes and Noble. Like I said, I went through Draft to Digital specifically so that I
Yeah.
could do book signings there, and go to. There's a couple of them near me, so I'm trying to do that. For my aunt, I told you about, that already has a couple books published. She was mentioning that you just have to get your book out there. So I'm open to like going to like right authors alleys, places that people can just buy your book naturally, if possible. And so I've tried
Yeah.
a couple things, but I haven't done everything. And I bet you have too, Marcus.
Yeah. Yeah. The other day I was at just a local farmers market where they, at the city park where they had vendors could come, and there were everything from little kids selling brownies to, um, you know, people who do it for a living all summer long. And um, when I'm at those, I always meet a lot of great people. But while I'm sitting there, I'm always thinking to myself, is like the time I'm spending worth the money I'm making? What's the value ratio here and all this stuff? And I
Yeah,
have to remind myself that it's not about how many people necessarily buy my books that night, because you usually don't sell that many books. It's just people tend to come to those to buy food or toys or listen to the band, not necessarily for books. But how many people see the book or see the booth or take one of my bookmarks, and then down the road when they're looking for something to read, they actually look me up? You just never know how many people are seeing you or what kind of influence you have. So I have to remind myself, this is worth it. It's worth it. You're
yeah,
not wasting your time. It's worth it. But it is tough, and especially when you've got so many other things on your plate. Is it worth spending 3 hours sitting here when you may sell one, two, three books? So it's tough. And for audience, people listening, if you're at one of those things and you see an author, go talk to them. Like,
yeah,
ask them about their books. Like, the one thing we love talking about is our books. So even if you're not going to buy one, it's okay. Just go up and talk to them. It makes us feel like it's worth being there.
yeah. No, I totally second that. It's like, it's funny you talk about how the I guess the opportunity cost, or just the cost of time, because I'm glad I'm not the only one, because yeah, I was at the Barnes and Noble. I sold I'd say a lot of books there, but
Good.
uh, but the thing with that is that they do a consignment. So like I got
Yeah.
60, they get 40, so it was a lot lower. And then you think I made what, like $10 an hour or something.
Right.
Again, it is not about that. It's all the reasons that you said.
Yeah. And being an author it's a long game. Like, you're playing a long game, really. There's very few authors whose first book strikes it huge as a big hit. And sometimes you wonder, like, you read a book is a massive hit, so you read it and you're like, how is this? This story is not any better. Sometimes it's just timing. It's just the people who find it first, who really like it and spread the word. Like, there are so many factors into something becoming popular or a hit, that you just got to keep going. You just got to keep pushing on and find your people. And yeah, so have you turned the book into an audiobook yet, or is that on the list of things to do?
I say it's on the list of things to do. Right now, I guess my focus is more about paying for school again. So
Yeah.
if I do get some extra cash, that'd be great. Because That's a question I have to ask you. Have you done that?
Yeah, so I did two books on my own. I narrated them myself. And then I had one, I needed a female narrator. So I just did the through Amazon, through ACX, and just the royalty share. So it didn't cost me anything, but I'm never going to, like, you'll never make any money that way, because you're locked into Amazon for 7 years and you're sharing the royalties with the narrator. Um, but I decided I wanted to try it and see what happened and just get the book out there. So I went ahead and did it. But the probably the biggest hurdle for me in the marketplace, or the kind of the, the need that I see, is I want to be able to sell it direct. So, right now it can go through it. You go through Audible or Barnes and Noble audiobooks or Apple books or whatever. And the margins are so small, your royalties are so small, that if you pay a narrator to do it, the odds of making that money back are really slim. Um, so I know there's a couple people out there and there's a couple services out there that are working on direct to consumer sales of audiobooks. So I'm hoping that takes off and works, because that would be great. Like, if I could just sell my audiobook directly and it works, but it's a software issue because most audiobooks are within an app. And people are not likely to buy your book and then download a new app just for your book. They want something familiar. So there is one service I've used, where you have to pay them, but they'll sell it direct, and then it just opens in whatever podcast app they use, which is kind of cool. So I think it's getting there. I've talked to a couple of people that are working on solutions for that. So hopefully in the future we can get to that point and bypass Audible and the big sellers.
Were those conversations with those individuals, were they past podcast episodes?
Um, no, one was through a service that I use. It's called Story Origin, and it's run by a guy. Like, it's one guy, he runs the company, and it's designed to help you build your newsletter, to help you connect, but then it also has a reader side so that you can volunteer to read books and leave reviews and everything. And he recently released a direct ebook sales, through his website, which is awesome because I can sell my ebook I can name my own price, and all I have to pay are the credit card transaction fees and like 30 cents or whatever. So I get to keep 90% of the sale instead of 30% when you sell it
Yeah.
on Amazon or whatever. And so I actually emailed him, and because it's a one-man show, he's the CEO, and he responded personally, and he said, "Yeah, I'm working on direct sell audiobooks." So
Wow.
I'm waiting on that to come. And I love supporting him because he's so responsive. Like, the CEO of the company responds back to you when you ask a question. It's not some call center. But yeah, hoping that comes soon.
Yeah, you talking about it, I hope it does for me too. Let's see. I was also thinking about when you were talking. So with your audiobook stuff, I don't know if you can share numbers or rather just kind of your general experience. Do you feel like more people are listening to the audiobook than uh, reading the physical or the ebook, or what are your thoughts on that?
um, I've never really dived into my own numbers, but I do know that I get a lot of people who, one of the first questions they ask when they're talking about the books is, "Do you have an audiobook? I only have time for audiobooks." Um, and I also know that audiobooks, just in the book market in general, Audiobooks are still growing, whereas ebooks and physical books are pretty stagnant in sales. So audiobooks is the future. It is the way to go. So one other thing I did is I requested my own audiobook through my local public library, and they accepted it. And so now it's available through the Libby app, through the library. And I'll go in there and just see every once in a while. And it's almost always checked out. So
Wow.
probably more people have listened to it through the library, which, hey, I'm happy with, because people are reading the book. But that's a good way to get your name out there as well. And most libraries, just on their website, they'll have a spot where you can request a book, so you can request your own book to be put in the library. So
That's
yeah.
a good idea. No, thank you for letting me know about that.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a cool feeling when you walk in the library and your book's sitting there on the shelf.
Oh yeah, it is cool.
So yeah, that's a great tip for readers out there as well, who love to read but don't have the money to just buy books, is request it. Because when the library buys the book, the author does get paid for that purchase. So you are still helping the author, and then you can check it out for free. So that's a great way to get books that you want to read but maybe can't afford, or just is not in the budget.
That's a nice life hack right there.
Yeah, for sure. So is there something that you wish someone had told you, some advice you wish you would have had when you started your author journey, that would have really helped?
Just trying to think about that one. First thing that comes to mind is just the cost, because whenever you make a book, you can edit. Yeah, sure, there are some things you can do yourself, like editing a little bit, but there is a lot of upfront costs when it comes to even making a book good. And then what I
Right.
mean by that, I mean just getting the story right, all the different types of edits you have to do, paying someone to do the artwork, just kind of that nice concise number of all the things you have to pay for before you even self-publish. I think it
Yeah.
would have been nice to know that, because in my mind it's like, okay, I'm going to get some help, editing this thing. I'm going to make it good and then publish it somehow. And
Right.
uh, I guess knowing that upfront cost, it would have been nicer to know. Though, I mean, it's not like I think it wouldn't have taken me away from the experience, but it's like, what I think this book in the end, like after editing costs and every other type of cost, formatting, even have to pay someone to
Mm-hmm.
format it. I mean,
Yep.
what, $2,500 or something like that. And so, yeah, I think I would have liked to know that, but maybe it's one of those things.
Yeah. Or maybe if you had known that, it would have been harder to actually follow through and get it done, just because that you're looking at that cost up front instead of doing the project. So maybe that's something you wish you would have known, but maybe it's good that you didn't know.
Yeah, maybe you're right, Marcus.
Yeah. Uh, and I think when self-publishing first started to be a thing, like when Amazon first started allowing people to publish books, um, self-published books got a bad name because people weren't paying for the edit. They were just throwing books on there. And they were bad just because they weren't, maybe the story was fine, but they just weren't formatted and edited. And I think it's been a long road of getting that reputation back, that indie books can actually be really good and quality. So we want to make sure we maintain that reputation, that hard-won reputation, I guess you'd say. But and you don't want your name associated with a poorly edited book,
No. And
But so in general, I know your audience is more middle grade. Um, But in general, do you think that clean books are like there's a marketplace and a demand for books that are clean in a world that's so saturated with so-called mature content?
Um, yeah, I think so. I think people, I hope, I have faith in people, even though I know that people, including myself, we maybe don't focus on what's actually important. I would
Yeah.
hope when they read a clean book and when they read not a clean book and kind of feel the difference of that, that they'll go with the cleaner version.
Yeah.
I feel like we need to have them because otherwise the whole world would just be overrun with not clean books. And
Yeah.
I'm glad at least that people are making clean books so that if they do want something a little bit less risque, they can get it.
Yeah. That it's available out there. Uh, as you're going to school, if you've got a family, you've got kids, how do you juggle your schedule so that you get writing time? Like,
Man, what a question. You know, I sometimes don't have that time either. I'm really
yeah.
trying. I have an author group that's really helped me actually to force myself to write.
Mm-hmm.
Just three of us, and two of us are self-published. But basically, we have this ritual that if you don't write within the next week, you have to eat a spoonful of hot sauce. And I did that yesterday, and it was really, really hot sauce. And I drank like a half a gallon of milk. It was horrible, but that really got me to write. And I, I don't know if you do you have kids, Marcus?
Yeah. Yeah. Mine are older now, but yeah.
Okay, so you kind of know a little bit about it, but my schedule is basically going to be going to school, watching my kids, and then have a little bit of time before I do a graveyard shift to pay, help pay for the school. So it's that little sliver of time where I can write. It's usually at the end of the day, as you know,
Mm-hmm.
when everybody's kind of in their beds and I can do a little bit. But I'm also trying to, like your previous life hack with the library. I'm trying to do some life hacks with writing. So, for example, I really like how technology has the voice to text functions,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm trying to figure out a system where I could like DoorDash, but then have like an iPad mounted to just be continuously recording so that I could turn my speech into text and that way I could get some writing done. I know it's kind
Yeah.
of silly, but I have to find every little way. Otherwise it's not going to happen, as you know.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's great. Like you got to find what works for you in the point of life you're at right now. Like I said, mine are older, so I'm more at the point where I have to, they're not bugging me. I have to go bug them to find out how their day was, you know.
Yeah,
But
that's going to be
uh,
weird to get there.
yeah, it's a very different experience. I mean, um, but the first book that I wrote was because I was away on business for an
Oh,
extended period of time. So I was in a hotel room at night. I work during the day, work out, eat, and everything, and then I'm just in a hotel room. And you can only watch so much TV sitting in a hotel room. So I started to write because I had nothing else to do, which is a weird a weird experience for someone with four kids and a job and everything. So um, yeah, it's hard to imagine starting at a kind of at that point of life where you're at right now with the littles who need your help and assistance and attention all the time. So I think whatever you can do, whatever hacks you can think of, you should do it. Go for it.
I think that hotel hack too. It's finding those little those little moments where yeah, it's just you and all right, this is the time. I also one of the authors I follow is Brandon Sanderson,
Yeah.
and I looked at his bio, and he said he was a night auditor when he was writing his books. First off, so I've been trying to figure out if there is a job that has a lot of downtime that still pays you. Those
Uh
are
huh.
out there, but I'm trying to find that as well. So I could always let you know if that works out, but I think
Yeah.
there is a lot of different ways you could write for sure.
Yeah. Like a night hotel clerk or something, something
Mhm.
like that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
There's got to be something out there that you can, if you want it, bad enough, you can make it work. You
No,
can
for
figure out a
sure.
way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we are about out of time. Thank you so much for this conversation. We need to go back over your 2 truths and a lie so I can
Oh yeah.
make a guess. Let's see. Where did it go? We didn't really jump into making rafts out of bamboo and milk jugs, or let's see. So that's number 1. Number 2, I won my middle school's poetry competition. And 3, my favorite lunch combo is PB&J with salsa and tortilla chips.
Yes.
We were so into our conversation, I didn't weave any of those in there. Well, you said you started writing as a kid, so even though you didn't win any awards in 3rd grade, you could have in middle school. Raft out of bamboo and milk jugs. And PB&J with salsa and tortilla chips is like, that's legit. I can go for that. So I'm just going to just random guess. I'm going to go number 2, winning the middle school poetry competition is the lie.
All right, Marcus. You are correct.
Yes.
So, what are you behind or are you in front? Right now?
I'm behind right now. Well,
okay.
So now it's 7-10. Brock had like a few weeks where he was like rolling. So very nice. See, he doesn't show up because he's protecting his family from a tropical storm, and I take advantage of that.
Well, you're such a good person. Yeah.
There we go. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. And for all of you out there listening and reading, please subscribe, follow, and most importantly, share the podcast with others. If you're looking for clean authors, this is a great place to get to know people, because when you trust the author, you can trust their books. So thank you so much, and we'll catch you all next time on the Clean Library Podcast.